Okay, looking at number 8 in our first chapter, we're looking at coordinate planes. We're going to be talking about some more algebra in this case. Okay, so first off, a quick reminder about your coordinate planes. So when you do a coordinate plane, you've got your x and y axis. Your x-axis goes left to right. Your y-axis goes up and down. And then what you have is you have these different quadrants. You have quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. As you see, they're in Roman numerals, and they start in the upper right hand corner and then they move in a counterclockwise motion. In mathematics, we do a lot of stuff counterclockwise and not clockwise when we talk about angles opening up and different things like that. And trig, we open up in a counterclockwise motion, and that's just how it is for math. Okay, so it's the opposite direction of a typical clock. Okay, so along with all this, we also have our origin, which our origin is right in the middle. So it's where the x and y axis meet. That's your origin, which is at the point 0, 0. Now, when you're naming off points, you usually go the x first, then the y. So if I wanted to name off a point like up here, at this point right here, it would end up being, actually, let's go down one. So if I want to name this point right here, it would end up being 4, 3. And this first quadrant is the, both of them are positive. The second quadrant, the x is negative, but the y is still positive. The third quadrant, they're both negative, both numbers. And the fourth quadrant, the x is positive, but the y is negative. Okay, so that's just your typical coordinate plane from Algebra 1, nothing really new. So we have a formula. We actually have two kind of formulas to go over in this section. First off is the distance formula. So the distance formula tells us how far away 2 points are on a coordinate plane, the distance from A to B. X sub A means that the x value of point A, and x of B means the x value of point B. And then YA is the y value of A, and YB is the y value of B. So that x sub A, x sub B, y sub A, y sub B, each one of those is just one number. So here we have our distance formula. It's the square root of the first part of the x's, the difference of the x's squared, plus the difference of the y squared. And then you take the square root of them. Okay. This is derived from Pythagoras theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, because when you graph 2 points, or when you graph a point on a line, basically what you're doing is you're trying to find the hypotenuse from the center to that point, or between those 2 points. So let's say we want to find the distance between those 2 points. Okay, so the answer ends up being 68. Square root of 68. With these, you could either keep it as a square root or you could round your answer. So this would be like 8.2, 8.1, somewhere around there. Okay, but when you set this up, you'd end up going 6 minus a negative 2. So it would end up being 8. And then squared, 64, plus 5 minus 7, which is 2 squared is 4. So you'd go 64 plus 4, which is 68. Alright, so with this we can deal with word problems. So we have Connor and Logan are throwing a football around Chris Christopherson Park. In the center of the park is a statue of Hank Williams. Connor is 10 feet south of the statue and 16 feet to the west of the statue. Logan is 35 feet to the north of the statue and 12 feet east of the statue. How far apart are Connor and Logan? Now, with this word problem, what we'd want to do here is that we'd want to center something. We want to have something at our origin. Now, since both of these, Connor and Logan, are both moved in reference to the statue of Hank Williams, we'd probably want Hank Williams at our center. So he's going to be at our origin. And then from there, we're going to move left, right, up, and down, depending on north, south, east, west. So at the top of this slide, you see there's a compass, and that's what you're always going to be using. So anytime you move up the y-axis, you're going to be moving north, down the y-axis is south. To the left would be west, and to the east is moving to the right. So with these, we'd want to name our points. So we'd have Connor first. He's 10 feet south of the statue, meaning we're moving down 10, so negative 10 for the Y, and 16 to the west. 16 to the west. West is also negative, so that means his point would be negative 16, negative 10. East-west is named first. That's the X value. And now Logan, 35 north and 12 east. So take a second. What would be the coordinates of Logan's point in reference to Hank Williams? All right, so hopefully you got your point for Logan would have been 12, because positive 12 because you're moving east, 12, and then 35 north. It'll be positive 35 because you're moving north. So your 2 points would be negative 16, negative 10, and 12, 35. Those would be our 2 points. So now we want to use our distance formula to find the distance of it. So take a second, find the distance between Logan and Connor. It should be a nice whole number. All right, so hopefully you've plugged everything in. When you plug it in, you end up with 12 minus a negative 16 squared plus 35 minus a negative 10 squared. So simplifying that, that ends up getting you a 28 squared plus a 45 squared, square rooted, which gets you 784 plus 2025, and figuring it getting you 53 feet. So it ends up being 53 feet as your answer. All right, so Casey and Trinity are now at Chris Christopher Park, and they decided to draw with chalk on the ground. Trinity is 4 feet south and 3 feet east. The Johnny Cash statue. Casey is not far away from the statue, as she is 1 foot south and 1 foot east. How far away? So take a second, figure out their distance. So again, your north, south, east, west is still the same. So take a second, find the distance between them. Alright, so hopefully you found your points. Trinity would end up being about 3, negative 4, and Casey ends up being 1, negative 1 would end up being their points. So there's their points there. Then you plug it into the formula, you end up with the square root of 13, and square root of 13 ends up being 3.6. Remember, when you take when you square a negative number, okay, you've got to make sure you put it in your calculator with parentheses, because when you square a negative, the negative disappears. But if you just type in negative 2 squared without any parentheses, your calculator is going to square it first and then multiply the negative. So if you did negative 2 squared without parentheses, you ended up with a negative 4, which will throw off your answer. All right, midpoint formula. Midpoint formula is able to find the middle point between 2 points on our x-axis. Okay, so it's to find the middle one. And this isn't going to get you a single number. This is going to get you a coordinate. So you're going to get a number like 4, 6. Okay. And what you do, basically, easiest way to think of this, take the average of the x's and take the average of the y's. Add them together, divide by 2. Add them together, divide by 2. And that's how you find your midpoint of 2 of them. So take a second, write this down. Okay. All right, so let's say we want to find the midpoint of 3, 5, and 7, negative 9. So what we would do is we take the x's and we'd add them together. So 3 plus 7 is 10, divided by 2 is 5. So that means our x value of our midpoint would be 5. So now, take a second, find the midpoint of the y values. Okay, so when you added them together, you got 5 plus a negative 9 gets you a negative 4, divided by 2 should have gotten you a negative 2. So you end up with your answer of 5, negative 2 would be your midpoint. Okay. All right, that's the end of this section. That is the distance and midpoint formulas. Make sure you write those down. You'll be able to use them for this online part.